Welcome to Book Corner. It's a catch up with one of my favourite authors, podcasters, journalists and writers, Mr. Gary Thacker. Guys, we've got you on here today to talk about your fantastic new book, Out the Blue. But for people that don't realise and know who Gary Thacker is, and I can't believe that there's anybody on Book Corner that doesn't, let's just have a little bit of your background first, please.
Yeah, sure, mate. Okay, so I come from Warsaw, not very far away from your good self, Paul, originally, now living in Spain. The book I'm going to talk about today will be my sixth book, including a couple of novels in there as well. I'll work a lot with these Football Times and the senior management team there, work a lot of podcasts with them. And I also write a weekly column over here in Spain for an English language newspaper about La Liga.
Fantastic. Let's just harp on to these Football Times, because I think you guys are fantastic. You've wrote so many books collectively. Who are the guys in these Football Times? I know Stu's got a new book coming out about the 1982 España 82. There's Stephen Scragg that's wrote the trilogy, and we're going to be talking about the Champions League, but when Stephen wrote it, it's the European Cup. And who's the other players?
Well, there are several. Basically, the team, the whole collective is about 50 or 60 people.
Right.
In the senior leadership team, there's myself, Stu, and Stevie, as you mentioned. There's Aidan Williamson, Chris Weir, Josh Butler, and Will Sharp, and Paul McParlin. So there's 7 or 8 of us in the senior leadership team. But as I say, the whole These Football Times sort of group is 40, 50 people.
Fantastic. And you do some splendid work, produce some great podcasts, and loving the South American stuff at the moment as well. But you did touch upon, you've got a couple of novels out there. The first one was there any naming after a protest song by Joe South? Because it's the games people play.
Do you know? No, the short answer is no. I don't even know the song, mate. It's a title that just came to me actually. I was writing the book, and because it's all about people sort of. I only used the phrase that people are being players sometimes, and sometimes you're being played, and sometimes you don't know the difference between the two until you find out later. So it just came to mind that the title. So no, I'm not familiar with the song, Paul, to be honest with you.
And a whole new ball game is part 2. How's Sophia? And is there going to be a trilogy? Because you guys like trilogies, don't you?
We certainly do. You know, I did a podcast with the guys actually about the book a few weeks ago, and they was asking me the same question. Yeah. I'd always got the idea of doing a sequel to the book because I've got the sort of continuation of the story in my head, but obviously other matters sort of taken over. So I've got the Chelsea book coming out, which we're going to talk about later, and I'm also currently working now on a book about the great Ajax teams of the early 70s who won the European Cup 3 times in the bounce, which is due out in May 2023. So I don't know, I might have a look at it then. It's got so many sort of little subplots going on in the background in my mind as to how I could develop it. So yeah, it's quite possible, mate. It's quite possible.
And how was the dynamics between fiction and fact? Because you've also wrote a fact book, Cheers, Tears and Jeers, the history of England's World Cup, which hasn't been it hasn't been very good since 66. And I mean, there's an argument they only won it really in 66 because it was at home.
It's true. It's a good point, mate. It's probably true as well, mate, because I don't think they're going to win it away from home in South America either before or after that. I actually wrote the first novel while I was also finishing off the book about the Dutch teams of the Oranges 74 and 78 World Cup players, the Cruyff Kroll era. And it was difficult. So I was sort of finishing one off. It was an awful lot of about 2 or 3 months. And people said to me, "Well, how do you do it?" Well, it's sort of I couldn't write 2 novels at the same time. Yeah. But when you're sort of doing a novel, a factual book, it's sort of easy to sort of immerse yourself in one world because it's entirely separate. It's like reading a book and cooking at the same time. Yeah. You couldn't read 2 books at the same time, but they're totally different genres, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm looking at the wonderful book, Beautiful Bridesmaids Dressed in Orange, an orange spelt in the Dutch way, the proper way, the unfulfilled glory of Dutch football. And Johan Cruyff is looking through the lens at me. It's a fantastic picture that is of Johan. And Johan Naiskins on the back, of course. What a team. And what a team Chelsea were. We go back many years to Chelsea. You were born, I believe, in 1956. The year that my team, Birmingham City, got to the FA Cup final and got done by Don Revie and the Revie plan. Although many recent football, not our legacy fans, but the Johnny Come Latelys, think that Pep Guardiola invented the deep lying centre forward, but it was certainly at the year of your birth.
Yeah, it was. I mean, Hiddy Guti is the Hungarians in the early 1950s. I mean, obviously 53 Gabbie Wembley. Yeah. He played as a deep line centre forward. So people who think Messi was the originator of the false nine under Guardiola, as you say, Paul, they are the Johnny Come Latelys, mate. There's not often anything new in football. It's just recycled ideas and presented in a different way.
Absolutely, and probably played in that position because Laszlo Kubala didn't he'd already defected to the West, hadn't he? What a group of players they were, the Hungarians.
Yeah, amazing team. I mean, talk about one of the best teams not to win the World Cup. I mean, you look at the Hungarians in 54, and then you got the Dutch in 74, Brazil in 82. I mean, some great teams not won the World Cup.
And there's a wonderful book that captures all that by one of your friends in these football times, Aidan, isn't it?
Yeah, to be honest with you, we've got a pod due in not too distant future to talk about it, so I haven't actually seen the book yet, but knowing the way Aidan works and his sort of dedication to detailed research, it's going to be an absolute barn burner for sure.
Absolutely. And 56, so in 66 you were 10, so you really had a good insight into England winning the World Cup. A few years after, Chelsea, your team, won their first FA Cup in 1970, went on to win their first trophy in Europe in 1971. I've got so many stories of those times, the kings of the King's Road, and I'm guessing that's why you fell in love with Chelsea Football Club, because they were such a fantastic group of players.
Well, that's certainly well. I mean, my sort of love affair with Chelsea goes back earlier than that. I mean, I remember supporting Chelsea when Jimmy Greaves got sold. I could never. I mean, I was only 3 or 4 at the time, and my dad and my dad telling me that Jimmy Greaves was going to play for Chelsea. But I couldn't understand why. Why would it something not? I mean, in my sort of naive, very early childhood. But I mean, coming from Warsaw. Nowhere near Chelsea. I don't know why I'm a Chelsea fan, but I'm where am I now? I'm 65 now, 66. I'm not too distant future. So I've been in Chelsea for over 60 years. So you see these people sometimes saying, "Oh, you're only Chelsea fan since Abramovich turned up and you started winning." You think, "Oh, that ain't true." Because I remember, where were you when you were shit? I was supporting Chelsea when we were shit a number of times.
Absolutely, but you wasn't back in them days, and just after that you had the Catch Us If You Can team with Terry Venables and George Graham, and then sadly a few of them had a problem in Blackpool, and Tommy got rid of them, and then Huddy and the boys, the new group, come through to Chelsea, and Chelsea, the Kings of the King's Road, were also the Kings of the King's Road in 2011, 2012. When did you decide to write the story? Because it is an unbelievable story of how Chelsea did become champions of Europe, and it really was against all odds, wasn't it?
Oh, I mean, it's one of these stories that, if I wrote a novel about it, the publisher would kick my backside and say, "Don't be ridiculous, nobody's going to believe anything like that." I mean, I've got in my mind to write the Chelsea story or the Beautiful Bridesmaids story first, but I opted for the Dutch one because it had wider appeal. But once I got that sort of agreed by the publishers and working my way through, they were keen to get for me to follow up with the Chelsea one. So I suppose it's been sort of it's been 5 years in the thinking, but sort of 2 years in the development. But it's a crazy story. Paul, I've talked to people so many times about this, and a season where the team were sort of having the worst season they had for a decade. Ridiculous in the Champions League. Look what they're going knocked out in the group stages. Then they played Benfica. And what away Benfica, where Benfica had lost a European game at home for about 3 years, and then nearly chucked it away in the home leg. And then the famous Napoli game, of course, when Villas-Boas wrote the longest resignation letter in the history of mankind by picking the team he picked. 3-1 down, almost 4-1 down, Cardiff played off the line. Amazingly turned that around. And then the ridiculous games against Barcelona. I mean, just absolutely crazy. And then to cap it all, to go and play Bayern Munich in their own stadium and get absolutely hammered. Another Barcelona hammering, in effect, for the entire length of the game, and then to go win it on penalties. It's the most ridiculous story when I've spoken to people in the past, I call this the most ridiculous story in the history of the European Cup, and come up with something that beats it. Nobody can. I mean, they mentioned the Man United come back in 99 and Liverpool winning after looking to go and, being 3-0 down against. But that was one game.
Yep.
This was 10 games. Yeah. Just absolutely crazy.
And that ultimately, Gary, is the difference. Yes, it was a great comeback by Liverpool. We didn't think that they would, at 3-0 down against that fantastic AC Milan team, get back into the game, let alone win it. And Manchester United, if you actually come in on 90 minutes and saw the score at 1-0, you'd think, right, but, they've actually lost the game of football.
Yeah.
But to score those two late goals was phenomenal. But Chelsea, it was that hit and miss. It was that Villas-Boas even gets the sack, doesn't he? During the season, Roberto Di Matteo takes over and carries that baton, wins the FA Cup. They finish sixth in the Football League. They get quarterfinals of the League Cup and win the Champions League. It really is absolutely crackers. And I was just looking there that they beat Liverpool 2-1 in the final. And what a save, I have to say, by Peter Cech off Andy Carroll. I mean, what a goalkeeper he was. And he really played his part in the Champions League win as well, didn't he? Especially in the penalty shootout.
Yeah, absolutely. I just said how remarkable the story was, and I even forgot to add in about the FA Cup, which you quite rightly put in there, mate. I mean, it must be one of the greatest saves in the history of FA Cup final, the one against Andy Carroll. But he not only the penalty shootout in the final, but he also denied Messi. He didn't say the ball, Messi hit the crossbar. But I've got the story in the book, and I read about what Cech said, that he was aware, because I think there's 10 games that Chelsea had played Barcelona, where Messi had featured, and he'd never scored against Chelsea. Yeah. And in this penalty, it's obviously because they sort of hammered Chelsea for so long, just after half time, I think it's about 55 minutes into the game, when they get the penalty, which incidentally, Fabregas later said that he dived and Drogba hadn't touched him. But it was a big game. What can you do? Well, you can't argue that, because what player wouldn't have done that? Yeah. But he was conscious of, and he thinks Messi was too. And he said, when he approached the ball, I decided I was not going to move. I just stood still. In the end, because you see Messi wanted to take the kick, he looks at Cech for a while before he looks down at the ball and takes the shot. Obviously, so because Cech hadn't moved, he was going to just lift it over him, but obviously he crashed against the crossbar. So, perhaps even aside from being a great goalkeeper, and then of course he had the penalty against Robin in extra time in the final as well. So obviously, his sort of mental attitude did us a favour as well as his goalkeeping talent.
And that was another one that Drogba gave away. I mean, he was a liability, wasn't he, in Chelsea's box? It was bloody good in the other box, but in Chelsea's box, typical central striker. But again, what a player as well, wasn't he, Didier Drogba?
Oh, amazing. As you say, real proper forwards tackle when defending. I mean, come back into the corners, otherwise keep out the way, guy. Get out the end of the pitch. I mean, it's amazing player for us, and not only as a sort of player, but the things he did for charity in Cote d'Ivoire, his own country, afterwards building hospitals and stopping a civil war. I mean, even outside of football, the stories about Drogba are such a legend, and I think ever since he left, Chelsea have been looking for the next Didier Drogba. They've signed so many players with so much money, and everyone sort of fell short. I mean, Chelsea buying strikers, it's been a disaster ever since Chris Sutton.
Yeah, it's one of these things. I mean, Alan Hudson, who would do a regular podcast with Uddy, speaks so highly of the king of Stamford Bridge, and there's not many Peter Osgoods. Unfortunately, Ramsey and Revy didn't see the beauty in Oz. But, he went to Mexico, of course, and Bobby Moore said to Alan Hudson, your mate was terrific in Mexico. Some of the stories that you heard about Ozzy, you said nothing like that, Al. He was superb. Sadly, Alf didn't play him. And, I think Ozzy had 5 England caps, but Drogba, I mean, again, one of the first foreign nationals over here to put their money to charity. I'd not really heard of that before Drogba started it.
No, it's true. But just a quick word about Ozzy. Ozzy is my all-time Chelsea legend favourite. I've got a picture of Ozzy on my sort of photo shootings with standing outside his statue outside Stamford Bridge, and he just simply headed the king and I, because he was the king. He was. Always my favourite player. In fact, as we talk now, I'm wearing a replica Chelsea FA Cup final 1970 shirt with 9 on the back. So there you go. But yes, I mean, he should have played when we played Brazil. We needed to go late on. Honestly, I think 19 at the time had just been the league's top scorer.
Yep.
You need a goal. So you got Ozzy on the bench. Who do you turn to?
Yeah.
Haskell.
I mean,
a decent striker, but Ozzy was a top perishing goal scorer. But Ramsey didn't like him, as you say, and Huddy's right. If he's the best player that Huddy's played with, then he must be some decent player. But going back to Drogba. He has started training many others afterwards. Obviously, doing the same sort of thing. I think Sadio Mane at Liverpool does a lot of similar work in Senegal, and a lot of players do. But he was probably the first to sort of set that trend, and more power to him for that, mate.
And in the league, the leading scorer there was 2, Super Frank on 11. And Danny Sturridge, I didn't realise that. Danny Sturridge scored 11 goals for Chelsea that year. Frank was top scorer in all competitions with 16. Again, what a player Frank Lampard was. But, again, when he was a kid and it was with Uncle Harry, took dogs abuse. Look at the puppy fat on him. He'll never make a footballer. But Frank Lampard got every drop of ability out of his body, didn't he? He worked his backside off. And as a manager, you can see that with Frank as well.
Well, that's exactly what I said to people about when they asked me about Lampard. I think as talent goes, he was far away from being the best, the most talented midfield player. Yeah. But what he got was he dragged every ounce of ability out of because the effort he put in. And the ridiculous stat is that, and I can't remember the exact figures, but he's either the 4th or 5th highest goal scorer in the history of the Premier League, and he isn't even a striker. He ain't even a striker, mate. I mean, he scored more goals than people such as Robbie Fowler. I think it's the Shearer, Rooney, Wright. I think Lampard scored more goals than Thierry Henry. I might be wrong, but ridiculous amount of goals for a midfield player. I mean, he's Chelsea's top goal scorer. He scored more goals than the likes of Ozzy, Kerry Dixon, Bobby Tamblyn. It's just ridiculous amount of goals he scored. And not only did he score goals, but he was a workhorse at midfield, dogged about in midfield and got back and defended as well. Amazing player.
Absolutely. Villas-Boas, you referenced him about the resignation letter. He also had a row with Ashley Cole. You could hear that at Stamford Bridge as well, couldn't you, apparently? Not the floors below.
Well, yeah. I mean, apparently, I spoke to
no names.
A very no Patrick, a very, very famous Chelsea fan, a very extremely wealthy Chelsea fan. It was at the same hotel in Naples where the club was staying before the game, and his room was 2 or 3 below, but directly below where Villas-Boas called Ashley Cole into his room to tell him he wasn't playing, and the language apparently was, this guy, talk about losing the dressing room. This guy had lost the dressing room, and he posted it to Timbuktu. It's just terrible situation. And in that game, bear in mind, it was a quarter final of the Champions League. He left on the bench Essien, Ashley Cole, Lampard, I can't remember who else, Mikel. And he said that Ashley Cole wasn't fit to play because he'd had an injury against Everton a couple of games previously, and he said he wasn't fit to play. And yet, because there was an injury to Basingwa 7 or 8 minutes into the game, Ashley Cole came up and played almost the entire game, which gives the light to the assertion that he wasn't fit to play.
You see, what you do as a manager, you just say to Ashley, Ash, are you fit? Yes, Gaffer, you're playing. It's as simple as that, isn't it? You don't tell Ashley Cole that you ain't fit when Ashley Cole knows he's fit and he can play there.
Yeah.
And dropping Super Frank as well. You just look at some of the things that Villas-Boas done at Chelsea was quite incredible. And I think that sometimes, especially with a young manager coming from a foreign country, because he'd done okay, hadn't he? I think he went unbeaten, didn't he, when he managed over in Portugal. But the English Premier League is very, very different to the Portuguese league. And the differential in ages between senior pros at Chelsea and Villas-Boas wasn't that great. And he seemed to try and distance himself instead of working with them players. When Mourinho come in at Chelsea, he done the polar opposite, didn't he? He recognised what talent Chelsea had got and worked with them. Difference.
Absolutely. Well, Villas-Boas, when he was in Porto, he'd won the league with Porto without losing a single game, and won the Europa League, or what it's called, the Europa Cup in those days. But yeah, I mean, he got this, when he came to Chelsea, he got this, the project, which was apparently, it agreed with Abramovich, or so the story goes, that he was going to sort of reduce the age profile of the squad by getting rid of players such as Lampard, Drogba, Terry, Ashley Cole, Peter Cech, Essien, break this sort of player power room that's forgetting. But instead of doing it in a way that, in a more sort of gentle, evolving way, he went and, stamped his foot in the puddle and created a lot of ripples and then wonder why he got wet.
Absolutely. But again, managers with experience go into situations and understand that, and I've always been of this opinion, that a team's only as good as the senior pros, and it's the senior pros that run the dressing room, and the manager's job therefore easy.
Absolutely, but as you say about Mourinho, different approach entirely. And Mourinho, when he came into Chelsea, when he got the Chelsea job, Frank Lampard was at an England gathering, and he'd spoken to the FA about just want to go and say hello to Lampard, introduced himself. I think Lampard had just come out of the showers, was getting sort of dressed after a training session. And he said, I'm Jose Mourinho, blah, blah. I'm going to make you the best midfield player in the world. Now, whether he actually was going to do that or not, Lampard said, it made me feel 10 foot tall. This is a guy who believed in me. And that's, as you say, Paul, that's because for somebody who sort of goes in and acts like some kind of despot, and somebody else who understands the value of experienced players and knows that they're the guys that win your trophies. Absolutely,
that's a 100% true story as well with Mourinho and Frank Lampard. Because I remember Alan Hudson telling me the same story.
Good stuff.
But again, Frank, that's what you do with players of Frank Lampard's ability. The FA Cup final. Let's just briefly talk about the FA Cup final. And the book, is it about just the Champions League or the season as a whole?
It's the season, Paul. The FA Cup's covered as well. There are a whole chapter covered to the FA Cup, yeah.
That final against Liverpool, Chelsea, Liverpool again, history, haven't they? Okay, people will say, it's only modern history, but now they go back years as well in the days of Shankly and stuff and what have you. So when you get an FA Cup final between Chelsea and Liverpool, it is something special, and it delivered, didn't it? Ramirez scored the first goal, Drogba scored the second. They were 2-0 up against Chelsea, and they're looking as though they were on easy street, wasn't they?
They were indeed, mate. Yeah, and Chelsea had played Liverpool 3 times that season. Actually, they hadn't played them at that stage because I think the last game was before the Champions League final. But they played Liverpool 3 times that season and twice the season before the league, and had lost every game. Liverpool had come to Chelsea and knocked them out of the League Cup at Stamford Bridge. So they hadn't particularly got a decent record. But Drogba at Wembley, at the Wembley final, is like some kind of, I don't know, it's like some kind of god of the arena. I think he scored more Wembley final goals than any other player. I think that's true. Yeah, I might remember. He certainly scored a lot in major finals there, be it League Cup or FA Cup, and and then we had obviously the Carroll. I think Carroll scored the first goal. I think, if memory serves me right. And then obviously the amazing Czech save and Carroll, I'll sort of did a little research over this afterwards. And Gerrard, fair play to the guy. He said, well, if that's what the referee says, I'm happy to go with his decision. I mean, but Carroll was obviously sort of celebrating. But if you look at the replays, it doesn't look like it crossed the line.
No, it doesn't.
But it does look like Czech's pulled off an impossible save and amazing goalkeeper.
Highest high and lowest low of the season as a whole.
I guess the lowest low was probably the game that ended up with that was his last game, which was the 1-0 defeat at the Baggies, which ended up being, and the Baggies fans were chanting, which is middle of March, sometime early March. The Baggies fans are chanting, you're getting sacked in the morning, and you get that quite often. This time it was true. Highest high, I guess, has to be when Drogba rolled that penalty in the last sort of kick of the game. And I've got a picture that the kids bought me up on my wall. And it's sort of from behind Drogba, and he's rolled the ball into one corner, and Neuer, he's sort of diving right to the corner. And I remember Martin Tyler shouting, he's done it, the greatest night in the history of Chelsea Football Club. I guess I can't argue Martin Tyler, can I?
It was the first time that they won the Champions League or the European Cup, wasn't it?
Chelsea, oh yeah, absolutely, yeah. It was the final, obviously, 4 years earlier in Moscow when
JT won it.
Slipped when there was a vital penalty against Manchester United.
And then, of course, they won the Europa League the season after.
Yeah.
Chelsea did. And they've actually won everything now that they can win. Apart, in club football, you can't win the World Cup or the Euros, but falling short of that, Chelsea have won everything, haven't they?
They have indeed, yeah. Obviously, sort of after we'd won the European Cup in 2012, Di Matteo only lasted, I don't know, a few months. I think he's by sort of December time he got the sack. We sacked Ancelotti the year after he'd won the double. Yeah. So, it's sort of unusual. But yeah, and then we won the Europa League under Benitez, as he was there as the interim manager. But yeah, obviously, very kind of them to do this, to win the Champions League last term, just to help my book sales along, because it's made it very topical again. So that was very decent of them. And obviously then to go and win the World Cup Championship, and every sort of pot that Chelsea could win, they've now won. I'm just waiting for them to enter a team in the belt race next year.
You never know, they probably will win it, but with Abramovich now leaving, I mean, things are going to possibly change there for Chelsea. But you look at the managers, I mean, you've just referenced that in the space of, a couple of seasons, they've had 4 managers. I mean, it's ridiculous to maintain a level of success at the elite level, Champions League, Europa League, FA Cup, Championships, and change your managers as consistently as Watford. It is quite incredible that Chelsea did do what they did.
Oh, yeah, you're absolutely right, mate. It almost defies logic that to be that successful, to win so many pots with that sort of rotation management. When people say that the hot seat at Chelsea, it really is hot because it's still warm from the previous guy when anybody else moves in. And yet, it's difficult to sort of criticise because you can't say it don't work. You can't say it ain't work, because I think from when Abramovich took over to now, Chelsea have won more trophies than any other English club. I think that's true. Yeah. It certainly used to be. I think that's still the case. And so, in Europe, very few clubs keep coaches any longer than 2 years. But in Chelsea, if it's 2 months, you're doing well, I suppose, really.
Absolutely. What contributors did you have to the book? I'm guessing that there were a number of people that you went to get their experiences of that season. And did Stevie Scragg give any input? Because you did give some input to the undisputed champions of Europe, how the gods of football became European royalty, and you did become European royalty in 2012.
Indeed. I don't think he asked me this book. Actually, I quote Steve quite often in the book I'm writing about Ajax at the moment. Yeah. But I don't think he did in the Chelsea book. But I managed to speak to quite a few decent, well celebrated people. I mean, Jonathan Northcroft, the Times, and the Telegraph. I'm not quite sure now. I spoke to Rafa Honigstein about the Bayern game, and Uli Hetzer, who is a German author. It's amazing how helpful people are sometimes. I mean, the book I'm writing now, I managed to get an interview with Ruud Krol.
Wow.
And Johnny Rep. I mean, absolutely amazing. So in previous books, I mean, I spoke to Graham Hunter. People are so nice once you manage to get in touch with them. It's really, really helpful.
I'm surprised Stephen was still talking to you actually after you beat Liverpool 2-1 in the FA Cup final.
We have a good bit of banter, me and Stevie, on podcasts, because the other guys, I mean, Stu lives in Hull, so he's a Hull fan, if anything, but he isn't really supporting any clubs. And we've got Paul Mack, who's an Everton fan.
Yeah.
So Steve and I have a lot of banter about Chelsea and Liverpool, but I mean they've been amazing the last couple of seasons, and Crofts been wonderful there. But they're always great games. I mean, we played them a month or so back, and that great 2-2 game at Stamford Bridge where Liverpool 2-0 up and Chelsea came back. I mean, some great games. I mean, Chelsea got a history of sorts of being involved in great games. You mentioned Hoodie earlier, and he's played some great games for Chelsea as well. I mean, you mentioned about the 71-72 Cup Winners' Cup triumph. I mean, great days. And we almost Chelsea now. It's you almost, I won't say you expect to win, but if you got a chance. When Hoodie and obviously Charlie Cork were playing, Eddie Mack, Chopper Harris, Peter Bonetti. When we won something, it was something special. It was something special, and those guys delivered some great performances and great entertaining games as well.
I'm guessing the preparation for 2012 was slightly different to Athens in '71, if I'm honest.
Yeah, I'd guess so, mate. I don't think the journeys down to the King's Road for a couple of beers were sort of involved in the preparation that Di Matteo put together, mate.
It was the Athens Hilton. Uddy had popped in there because he was walking off a dead leg, so he got a taxi up to the Athens. Was going past the Athens Hilton, and he says, "Like, just drop us off here." Because he was only a young kid. I think I was 19 at the time.
Yeah,
and probably wouldn't go to Athens again, and it's in the Hilton. And he said, I walked through to like the pool area, and he said, "Paul, I seen a table. There's Osgood, Charlie Cook, Sponge, and Johnny Fennell, one of the mates." He said, "I've never seen so much alcohol on a table." He said, "I said to us, he said, you do realise that we didn't win last night. We're playing them tomorrow in the replay." And he says, right. "Young good, you're going to have an early night because you're going to do my running and I'll score the goal." And Ozzy always delivered. But Uddy said, if the manager of Real Madrid or the coaches had gone into the Athens Hilton, they would have seen 3 Chelsea players off their nuts. And that's exactly the words Hudson used. Different with Robbie Di Matteo in 2012. But how did the players get on with Robbie? I know with Dave Sexton, there was a lot of stick, but no carrot. But what was the dynamics like with Robbie?
I think the difference is that, and this is where he could succeed, where those Boas failed, is he was a Chelsea man.
Yeah.
Before, obviously, his playing career. A similar thing happened when Avram Grant took over from Mourinho. They brought in Steve Clarke as his assistant. So there was a Chelsea sort of, it wasn't totally new, somebody from outside. Well, Villas Boas had that sort of, detachment from the club, whereas Robbie Di Matteo and the players, I think, although they call, and I sort of got a few interviews, well, I didn't interview them, but I've seen interviews with them, which I've used in the book, where they say that, and they call Di Matteo now, they call it Robbie. Now, at the time, they called him boss, but even then, although he wasn't sort of, what's the word I'm calling, generations apart from them. Yeah. He seemed to be have earned his respect because of what he did on the pitch, rather than, I think, when you get a manager go to a club, any club, especially as a young manager, you've got to have some cachet about you. You've got to be able to put your medals on the table. Where you've got to have succeeded as a player, or already have success as a manager on a long-term basis. And if you haven't, you've got to try. It's a difficult job to earn respect. When you look at, it's not this, no disrespect to Doncaster Rovers, but you're not going to Doncaster Rovers. You're going into a top Premier League team. You've got to be able to. You require respect, and if you don't bring that with you, you've got to earn it very, very quickly. And I think that was the advantage Di Matteo had, that he had that respect already because of things he'd done with Chelsea and trophies he'd won with Chelsea, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. The quickest goal in the Wembley final as well. What a strike that was, in the bar and straight in.
Yeah. It was, Middlesbrough, yeah.
But, the book, you've got your own Twitter feed, your own social media. You're big on that. So let's have a shout for how people can purchase the book and how they can link up with you, Gaz. And also, when does the book come out? 'Cause it's not quite out. It's out in April, isn't it?
You're right, mate. It's at the 11th of April.
Yeah.
You can get on Twitter. I have a Twitter feed for it, as you mentioned, which is at OOTB 2012, which is out of the blue 2012. So it's at OOTB 2012. The book is available for pre-order now. It's actually, I've just looked this morning actually for when I was doing a bit of work on my current book, that it's currently at number 8 in the European Cup section on Amazon, and number 12 in the Chelsea section. So even though it's not out for another month yet, it's still doing pretty well. But anybody's interested can find it on Amazon. But if you just plug my name into Amazon, that's Gary, Gary Thacker, Thacker. I've got my own Amazon page, so all my books are listed on there, and Out of the Blue is sitting there nicely, with just a click away from being ordered.
And your Twitter page as well is all -blue-days, isn't it? So, if people want to get hold of Gary Thacker, they can. The easiest way is to put it into a search engine, Gary Thacker, and every comes up, Gaz. Different class.
Follow back forward as well, mate.
Yeah, also on Facebook, you're very upfront on Facebook. So I think your social medias, it's important to get out to the masses. How have you got out to Chelsea Football Club? Have they recognised the book? What's the dynamics there?
It's difficult. The short answer is no, I haven't.
I know,
it's difficult. It's all very corporate these days, mate. And speaking to a lower league club, you've got far more chance. And look, for example, the cover of the book, Out of the Blue, is got Drogba check on the front, but you can't use images from the Premier League era without paying a fee to the club. So they're basically illustrations on the cover of the book, and it tends to be the way, as I say, these days, the Premier League, the money sort of situation with clubs is immense. So no, I did sort of briefly try and explore the club, but it sort of found me very quickly on complications, shall we say.
So with Chelsea images of Premier League, it's all, you have to go through Chelsea, because like if you looked at Chelsea images before the Premier League, it's probably Getty that owns probably most of them, because that's what happens, doesn't it? The photographers sell the images to Getty, and anyone that writes books and want to put pictures in that they don't own has to pay an absolute king's ransom to get all of that. Yeah. Probably for only the usage of that book at that time. If you want to rerun the book, you have to reapply and repay exactly, well, probably even more money, if I'm honest, with inflation.
Yeah, I believe that's the case. I mean, when I spoke, it was something I wasn't really aware of. When I spoke to the publishers about the book, and obviously you discussed cover options, that sort of thing, and they mentioned about this. I didn't know, because I said, well, why do you need to illustrate it? What cover you use? I'm not sure it's Getty they use picture libraries, similar to Getty, if it's not Getty. Yeah. But then the guy, their sort of designers explained to me about, you have to pay a fee to the club, and so that's why the any covers of that sort of post-Premier League era tend to have illustrations on the front rather than photos, which I guess, that's just the way the world these days, Paul, isn't it, really?
Yeah, I think it is, and I think it's sad, and I think that, with the wonderful publication that you've written about Chelsea, it's the season of 2011-2012, an iconic season. You would think that Chelsea would say, Gary, thanks for writing the book. There's a shelf at the club shop there at Stamford Bridge, and then Chelsea fans can see it on the shelves and purchase it. But in the real world, what we have to do is we have to do these podcasts, etc., put it out on social media, and hope that we get a few bites. And if we hashtag Chelsea or celery or CFC, where did celery come from? It's always something that's amazed me with Chelsea, celery.
I mean, since I've had the ATOOTB 2012, I've got a lot of Chelsea followers, and I speak to other people sort of change things about the games and such like. And I've asked a couple of guys, and they don't know. There's even this one guy who's at Blue Boy or something like that, and he's got celery in sort of range of celery spread out across his Twitter profile, and I thought he's got to know, but he doesn't. So I don't know. It's fascinating.
It is crazy. I mean, I know where the white wall come from. I mean, that was the back of the shed, wasn't it? But, celery, it's still unsolved. Yeah.
But, one guy mentioned to me that he thought it was about the time. Do you remember when there was all this fad about taking inflatables to games, like, these inflatable bananas?
Yeah, that was in Ray Varady, wasn't it, at Man City?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, he said he thought it was came from about that sort of time, and somebody taking some in from the shop. I don't, but it seemed a bit too far-fetched, so I really don't know. I'd love to find the answer out myself, but it's a really sort of great mystery.
Well, whether that's a true story or not, why spoil it, because it's fantastic, and you should always end on a good one, so we're going to end there. But finally, is there anything that you want to bring up that we haven't brought up, and anything that you've unearthed? Because we don't want to give too much away about the book, Gary, because we want people to buy the book and go onto Amazon and buy it. Are you selling it from a personal website where you capture more of the money, or is it just the usual socials and stuff?
Yeah, it's the usual ones. I mean, the publishers have their own website to sell from there, which is Pitch Publishing, which they publish some fantastic books. And you mentioned Stevie's and earlier, we all sort of signed up to Pitch. But after the thing about the story, I think it's such a popular story. It's been told so many times. Perhaps the one thing I'd mention is, and this is something that Terry flagged up. I spoke to Sky and they were very kind enough to send me the sort of coverage of the documentary they did about the game, about the tournament afterwards. Terry tells a story about ahead of the game, Di Matteo arranged for all the players' family and some of the young players' parents to go over to Munich, and ahead of the game, appear sort of at the end of a training session, I think he said it was, to say to the players how proud they were of them and how much they were looking forward to the fun, how they believed in them. And he said that, even though Terry said I wasn't playing, it was a really moving situation, moving occasion, and a lot of the players felt inspired. And I suppose that's when you get a sort of player who's into the family of the club, an ex-player, I should say, like Di Matteo, has probably understood the value of that sort of thing and how it would sort of generate. And I guess in the end, you have to say it worked because they won.
Absolutely, and that's old school. That's how we used to manage back in the old days. Gaz, can I thank you so much for your time, sir? All the best with these football times. All the best with the Chelsea book, Out of the Blue. All the best with the Ajax book as well. And all the best for anything else that you're doing. And anytime you need me, I'm only too happy to do a podcast with you and with Stephen or with Stuart. I haven't had the privilege of those boys yet. And well done to Pitch Publishing. You're absolutely spot on. Them guys publish some fantastic football books. And guys, keep writing and keep reading, because these stories should never be forgotten. They're too good.
God bless you, Paul. Thanks for that. You keep these podcasts coming and keep it going with Audie, because it's always fantastic to hear about the great old days.
Cheers, pal. Thanks for your time. Cheers, Marcus. Bye-bye now. Bye-bye.